Hey, what's up, YouTube? Welcome to my channel, Ask Jimmy Smith. Today, I'm excited to be talking to you about a topic I get asked about quite a bit, actually, which is the topic of Amazon FBA and doing wholesale as the main model. Now, I've done videos on my channel for the three main models for selling on Amazon, and specifically with FBA. The first one is arbitrage/replens. The second one is wholesale, and then the third one is private label. And so today, we're going to be covering that second one of wholesale. Now, just so you know, I have been selling on Amazon since December of 2015. We've had plenty of wholesale accounts. At one point, I believe our wholesale business was about 15% of our over $100,000 per month. And we have very high profit margins with our wholesale as well because of the methods I teach. So we use the Replens methodology that I go through on this channel that I talk about in my book, Side Hustle to Full-Time Income. We use these same exact methods. If this will zoom in, we use the same exact methods that I teach there and in my course to also utilize that in our wholesale accounts. So hopefully, if you are getting into wholesale, this will help open your eyes to the pros and cons, but also you can start to apply the methods I teach on this YouTube channel traditionally on Replens and Arbitrage to finding the best products for your wholesale business on Amazon. So let me go ahead and bring up this presentation. So for those of you that hate presentations, you're probably not going to like this video, but I try to line out the exact pieces of information that you need to be successful with this and to really learn the pros and cons. But let's talk first about those pros. Why do wholesale on Amazon, specifically with FBA? You could do fulfilled by merchant instead of fulfilled by Amazon, but for the majority of people doing wholesale, you're going to want to do FBA. But the first pro is that, if this will go, hold on, there we go. All right, more availability of product. That is the first pro. So you've got the ability, if you are comparing arbitrage versus wholesale, with arbitrage, you're going to stores, you're doing it online or in retail stores, and ultimately you may only be able to get a few of the products at one specific store. Maybe there's 3 at that store and then they're out of stock, or 4 or 5 or 10 and they're out of stock. Well, with wholesale, you naturally have more availability of products to order. You can order in cases of 50, cases of 100, whatever that might be for the particular product and a particular brand or distributor that you're working with. So that means that you can scale much more quickly. You hopefully will have a higher barrier of entry to, which means that you have less competition on those listings, depending on the distributor or product that you're purchasing, which is a caveat there. But ultimately, if you can order more, then you can grab more of the sales and not have to deal with as many supply chain issues. Now, over the last couple of years, we are in 2022 right now. With COVID, there were still supply chain issues across the board with arbitrage, wholesale, and private label sellers. I actually did a video on it. It was one of my first videos on YouTube on the supply chain issues and how to handle those. But for the most part, you're going to have a much better supply chain with wholesale than you will with retail arbitrage. The next piece, the next pro, is that sometimes you can get bigger discounts. Now, the reason I put sometimes, because many people might think, well, if I'm ordering 50 or 100 of them, I naturally should have much bigger discounts on my products. The issue is that if you're buying from a Walmart or a Target or some other national store with arbitrage, they typically are getting the best prices out of anyone in the whole entire world, right? Because they are able to buy so much scale. So sometimes Walmart specifically, I know this for a fact, will sell below what they can buy that product for because it's a loss leader in their company. You see that with major stores around the country, that they will have loss leaders for their particular products. Well, in those cases, more than likely, if you're ordering 100 and Walmart orders 100,000, they're going to get much more discounts than you will be. And so it might actually be more expensive to purchase wholesale from a distributor versus purchasing the products from a retail store that gets them nationally and can order much more volume and scale. Now, you can absolutely still get bigger discounts than in the store. We do this all the time. And depending on how you set up your relationships with that distributor or brand, if it's an exclusive or if they're just letting anybody onto the listings, that will dictate some of your discounts as well. Because if you have an exclusive or a semi-exclusive relationship with the brand, you're doing much more work for them, you're more involved in working with them on their account on Amazon, then many times you can negotiate bigger discounts because they know that you're helping them to expand their brand on Amazon as a platform and other e-commerce platforms as well. So sometimes you can get bigger discounts with wholesale, naturally, because you're ordering more products, and also it depends on the brand and the distributor there. So that is definitely a pro. The next thing is that it can be easily outsourced to a prep center, and I put in parentheses with enough margins. You naturally have to have enough margin to make this work for you, but ultimately it is much easier to outsource wholesale to a prep center than it is to outsource arbitrage to a prep center. The reason is because with wholesale, they're getting 50 or 100 of an item that's nicely packaged typically, and there's usually going to be less issues with breakages and damages and all of that kind of thing. They can receive pallets with prep centers depending on the one that you work with, and it's just much more easy to get a prep center to work with you if you're doing a wholesale. Most prep centers, most of them, I would say probably 95% plus, will accept wholesale and private label. Maybe even all of them accept wholesale and private label. I don't know though. But a lot of prep centers will not accept online arbitrage as a client because there's return issues, there's damages, there's mismatches on products, there's all types of issues there. So you can have issues with a prep center if you're doing arbitrage. There are plenty of great ones that will work with arbitrage sellers, but it's much more easy to be able to outsource wholesale and private label to prep centers than it is for anything else. The next thing is that it is much more outsourceable to a VA or a team of VAs, depending on the type of wholesale business that you have. A VA, typically, if you're doing wholesale and you're doing cold outreach, you can have a virtual assistant that finds the brands, contacts the brands, sends out the emails, is able to do brand reviews if you have them going that deep and trying to be more specific with the brand emails that they're sending to those particular support teams or I guess contacts at those brands. It can be very easily outsourced. Plus, even orders and reorders are more simple to outsource to a VA, especially if you're using a software like Replens Dashboard to help you with your inventory management. You can teach the VA on how to do the inventory management and reorders for your wholesale accounts in a much simpler way than you can with arbitrage. With arbitrage, there's many more sellers that can jump in and off of the listings. You can have profitability that fluctuates much more heavily versus with wholesale. Yes, there will be fluctuations, but typically it's not going to be as heavy as it is with arbitrage. And so it's a little bit of a simpler process to train a VA on how to source for wholesale products and how to contact brands and how to do any back-end work on listings or images or titles, bullet points, etc. If you really want to start creating much more value with the brands that you work with. So you can do a ton of great work with a virtual assistant that in many arbitrage businesses, yes, you can absolutely outsource to a VA, but it's going to be a little bit more specialized in some cases in different ways than the specialization required for wholesale. I personally think that outsourcing to a VA with wholesale is a little bit simpler than outsourcing to a VA with arbitrage because there's typically less factors to consider in terms of the products you're sourcing with competition, price fluctuations, reviews, all these other issues that can come up from an arbitrage perspective, which I've talked about on this channel plenty of times. The next thing is that wholesale can provide much more stability to your business. Absolutely, this is 100% true. However, I will say that with arbitrage, the reason that my book, Side Hustle to Full-Time Income, and my course has had over 1,000 success stories, which you can find those at AskJimmySmith.com/success right there. If you want to see over 500 of those 1,000 success stories, the reason I've had all of those success stories come from that content is not because it's just anybody can do it, but it's mainly because you're able to have stability in your arbitrage business by building replenishable products. But with wholesale, it's absolutely more stable because you are able to order from a brand and a distributor. You're able to create that stability just naturally because that is the whole point of having a wholesale account. Whereas with arbitrage, the stores might go out of stock on something. They may discontinue the product. Maybe a bunch of other people find that product. There's a ton of different reasons why arbitrage is much less stable than wholesale, but even with the Replens methods, which can be a stable business model as it has been for me and many others, wholesale will still be more stable. And here we go. So the next piece with wholesale is that you can do this from anywhere. Absolutely, you can do online arbitrage from anywhere also, but to me, wholesale is just a natural step because you can order in with all of these pros. You can order in bigger quantities, you can get bigger discounts, you can easily outsource it to a prep center, you can have a VA do it, so you can do this from anywhere. That is a pro, just as much as it's a pro that you can do private label from anywhere, and you can do private or online arbitrage from anywhere as well. So let's talk about some of the cons, which is why is starting with wholesale a bad idea? And that's the main thing. There's obviously cons to a wholesale business in general, just like there's cons to arbitrage and private label. But why is starting with wholesale a bad idea? If you are considering doing this, I wanted to cover those specific cons. First, typically you will need to purchase in larger quantities. You can't just usually order a test batch of four or four items of that particular ASIN. You almost always need to order a case or multiple cases or even pallets to be able to get the amount of inventory that you need to have the high enough price breaks to be able to sell enough on Amazon and to be able to get maybe free shipping depending on the different discounts that they have. So you typically need to purchase in larger quantities, which gives you less ability to test a product first to make sure it's actually going to continue to sell. So that is an issue, especially if you've never done arbitrage or replens in the past and you're looking to start with wholesale first. Because of the pros that I mentioned, there are cons because you're going to have to be taking much more risk up front without the knowledge that you might have if you had tested that product first. Now, as I mentioned, there's no ability to test products, and price taking can still occur in wholesale. It's not completely proof of avoiding price taking issues from other sellers. You can still, depending on how you're getting these brands or these distributors, you can still have distributors and brands that are open to anybody that contacts them having a wholesale account, in which case that can lead to a ton of price tanking if a bunch more sellers find that account, open them, order a bunch of products, send it in, and not just sent in 4, but they had to send in 50 or 100, which really leads to much more price tanking. So you have to be careful if you're starting with wholesale. That's why I recommend starting with replenishable products and arbitrage first, and we'll get into that in the next slide. The next con is you may not know how to read Keepa properly yet. So if you've followed my channel for any length of time, Keepa is the #1 software that you need to use. There's no affiliate that I have, nothing like that. But Keepa is the golden goose, so to speak, of that is the thing that you need to learn to know that you're purchasing the right products for arbitrage and wholesale. And if you are brand new or you're looking to start with wholesale, you may not know how to read Keepa properly yet because you haven't had enough time in looking at enough products for arbitrage to know how Keepa works. I can look at a Keepa graph and typically within 10 seconds know if I should buy that product or not. For many new sellers, it might take a few minutes. It might take 5 minutes of digging into the data, etc. But as you get much better with Keepa, it is a lot easier to know if a wholesale product will also be stable, or at least more likely to be stable if you know Keepa, which is why testing with arbitrage first can be a much better way to go for you. The next thing is you don't have the selling data to make the best decisions. Now that comes back to there's no ability to test products because you aren't able to sell that stuff first. Well, let's say you place a purchase order because there's a minimum order amount of 50. Well, if you're not really the best at reading Keepa yet, or you don't really understand that the other sellers on the listing have thousands of units and you're competing with those sellers, or there's a bunch of other different factors that can come into play, and you don't have the selling data to know that ultimately if you order 50, you'll sell 50 in a month or two, you may end up selling 50 over a year or 2 years if you aren't really good with these other things. And so I highly recommend utilizing your arbitrage and replenishable products to look for wholesale accounts after the fact, because you'll have the test data, the selling data first before you ever order any products for wholesale. The next thing is that wholesale will require more capital up front, typically. I say typically because you can absolutely start an arbitrage business with $10,000 if you wanted to. But as I've done other videos on this channel, you can start with $0 for arbitrage, work up to $100 to $500, and then start buying your first products for arbitrage. With wholesale, you're typically going to need a much larger purchase order to be able to get much larger discounts or free shipping because you have to order a much higher volume of those products. And so you're able to, with arbitrage, test many more products at a much lower value. Whereas with wholesale, you're going to be testing less ASINs because you have to order so many more of those particular ASINs, 50 or 100 each, many times, maybe 12 or 6 at a minimum, depending on the brands. But ultimately, you're going to be testing so much more, and that requires a lot of capital, or a lot more capital upfront. Now, as I've alluded to throughout this, why should you do replens or arbitrage first? And I put replens / arbitrage for a couple different reasons. Arbitrage absolutely is buying something from online or retail stores and selling it on Amazon. Replens is the method that I teach through the book and courses and stuff that I do, where you are buying it typically at full price, and you're able to continually replenish those products from those stores because they're selling them at full price anyway. So as you buy 5 of them, they restock. You buy another 6, 7, 8, whatever, they restock. You buy 10, they restock. Maybe you buy 8 or 10 again, they restock. You're replenishing those arbitrage products from the stores, online and retail. So why should you do that method first? And if you want to learn more about that, check out this channel, tons of videos on it. But first, you're going to learn what is selling on Amazon. And this is a huge piece because as you're testing products, you can test with 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, whatever you want. Get a few of those items, send them in. You can see what's selling in your inventory, and then you can go back and replenish that. So once you learn what's selling, not just the exact products, but the types of products, the keywords that go into that in the listings, what the listings look like that sell well, what the keepographs look like that sell well. Once you get that data, it's much easier to select the right wholesale accounts and the right wholesale products for you to be successful in the wholesale business. The next thing is you can learn how to find bundles and multi-packs. Many wholesale training courses, I've been through a few, believe it or not. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on courses over the last 5 to 10 years at this point. And I've gone through some wholesale courses. Well, a lot of them teach, not all of them, a lot of them will teach using UPC lists, getting a price sheet from the wholesale company that you're working with, and you just run that through Tactical Arbitrage or Price Checker 2 or some similar software that is just scanning UPC codes left and right. And while that can be great, it can also miss out on some bundles and multi-packs that you can utilize to sell on Amazon that follow their listing rules, etc. So with Replens and Arbitrage, you are learning how to find those bundles and multi-packs through reverse sourcing or through keyword searching on Amazon versus just searching the UPC only. And while there is value to making sure that there's a UPC match, absolutely, based off of Amazon's rules, you can still miss out on some of the good listings that may be set up or structured in a different way, specifically bundles that might have multiple products in one listing that you can sell at a much higher profit margin and get from a wholesale perspective. So if you learn how to find those, you can take that information and apply it to your wholesale business and be much more successful in that method. The next thing is you're going to test products first. As I mentioned, you learn what's selling, but you're also able to test them on a small quantity basis. You don't have to get 12, 50, 100, etc. You can get 4 or 2 to test them and make sure they actually sell. And as you are making sure they sell and you're seeing, oh, wow, I sold 4 in 2 weeks, I'm going to get 8. Oh, wow, I sold 8 in 3 weeks, I'm going to get 10. Okay, so it seems like this ASIN is selling about 10 to 12 in a 30-day period, or maybe it's much higher or lower. But ultimately, you're seeing the selling data, you're testing those products first, and then you have a much more informed place to come from whenever you are placing wholesale orders. The next thing is you are learning how to sell on Amazon. So if you're brand new, this is the best way to learn to sell on Amazon because it's a much lower risk. You're testing with less money typically, and you're able to see how shipments work. You're able to see if you want to start with a prep center, how a prep center works. You're able to see all the fees that come out and the cash flow, all of these different data points, how opening cases and account management, account health, all of these little things, you're able to see that on a smaller scale and not be risking a lot more money and time and investment on wholesale when you could be starting with arbitrage and replens first. Next thing is you don't get in over your head because you're able to start on a smaller scale. You're not going to be placing a $5,000 order for wholesale. You can place a $500 order for arbitrage, and you're not going to be, just purchasing the wrong products at the wrong time and losing a bunch of money as easily with arbitrage as you would with wholesale, right? It could be because you're able to test smaller. You might test all the wrong products, but maybe if you test all the wrong products, you lost out on $500, not lost out on $5,000. So that's why I mentioned you don't get in over your head. Now, most of our wholesale accounts were replens first. And so I just want you to know that all of the wholesale that I've done in the past, the majority of them were replens first. I highly recommend starting with replens and arbitrage because of this, because you can see what sells well. You can contact them directly. You have knowledge on the data for their listings if you need to get in a much more detailed discussion with them about how you can help their listings on Amazon to be improved and to help their exposure on the platform. So utilizing the information that you've learned from a replens perspective is a huge value add and why you should start with replens and arbitrage first and then move to wholesale next, and or private label, which I may cover in future videos as well. How do we determine the best arbitrage products for wholesale? Well, first and foremost, you want to keep it simple. There are a lot of crazy methods out there that work, but they are, to me, very complicated. And if you're doing arbitrage, you have a wealth and a treasure trove of data that you can access and utilize to turn those products into wholesale accounts. So the first thing that you want to do is to realize that wholesale is the focus here, not exclusives. Exclusives can be a whole separate video that I've done in the past. Well, I haven't done a video in the past, but I've done exclusives in the past and have done them even as recently as a couple weeks ago. But ultimately, I'll make a separate video on exclusives specifically. Right now, we're just focused on getting wholesale accounts so that you can be looking to purchase much higher quantities at a much bigger discount, etc. So wholesale is going to be the focus for these next couple slides. Now, you want to look at your best-selling and most profitable products first within your arbitrage products that you have. And I'll give you the reports to look at here in a second. But the reason you want to start there is because, well, naturally, they make you the most money, right? You're selling the most of those products, but also you've got the data. You know what's selling well and you know what's most profitable. So you can be much more confident in those products that you're ordering a much higher quantity of because you know that they're selling well already. You know that they have enough room and margin in them for you to turn them into a wholesale account. And if they start dropping in price, then the fact that you ordered 100 of them hopefully isn't as big of a deal because they're the most profitable products for you. And so you want to start there before looking at the other things. You don't want to just look at all of your data. If you've got 100 SKUs or thousands of SKUs and just cherry pick, just random ones, you want to actually go through and pick the best ones in your account. So that is what we're going to be starting with. The next thing that you want to look for are things that are hard to keep in stock or things that are difficult to find in stores. That is extremely important. If you're doing retail arbitrage and every time you show up, it seems like they're out of stock of a particular product that you want to be buying to sell for your arbitrage business, well, that's going to be a key sign, in my opinion, that you should reach out and try to find a distributor that you can get much higher access to those products. Now, if that brand or the distributor is having supply chain issues and that's why it's always out of stock at your store, then that might be a difficult task for you to overcome. But ultimately, it might just be that they're selling so many at the store can't buy enough and send enough in for that particular product. And so you're looking for things that are hard to keep in stock on Amazon because you're selling so many of them, and things that are difficult for you to find in stores because every time you go, they are out of stock. Also, when you're at a store, even if you aren't selling something and you see a row of items, or I guess a column within a row of items that is out of stock, I recommend taking a picture of the label and doing some research at home to see if you can buy it for arbitrage elsewhere, or if you want to look for that for a wholesale account elsewhere as well. So those are the things to be looking out for in your business and in the stores. Now, let's look at some reports that you can download. First, there's Inventory Lab that you can utilize. So if you're using Inventory Lab, you can go to Reports and then ASIN Profitability. That's a complete report that you can download, a bunch of information there. You want to change to all instead of just the last month using the advanced search option. The reason is because if it defaults to last month, but you're going to miss out on all of the ASINs that you've sold over the entirety of your Amazon selling career. And so you want to get all of the data versus just the ones in the last month. Next, you want to take that report and you want to sort it by revenue or profit to look at the highest ones first. So that way you can see how much money you're making on particular ASINs, and you can take advantage of that information when you reach out to the accounts that you want to pick the best ASINs for you to order from a wholesale perspective. Now, if you don't have Inventory Lab or you're trying to do it just on Seller Central, here's a different report that you can use, which is Reports. Go to Business Reports, and then the detail page, sales and traffic by child item, not by parent item. You want to look at child item because if there's variation listing, you want to see the children of the variation, and you're going to be running that report. Change it for this current year, or if it's really early in the year when you're watching this video, maybe it's January 5th or something, then do all of last year. You can't run a report that's an extremely long amount of time. If you've been on Amazon for a good amount of time, you have to do it, I believe, within 12 months or 18 months. And so I recommend doing it for January of the year that you're currently in through today. But if it is early in the new year, then you want to do it for the year prior. The next thing is sort by ordered product sales or descending. You want to make sure that it's a descending amount. So that way it's going from the highest first to the lowest at the bottom, and see how many units of those products that you've actually sold in Seller Central. I personally like the Inventory Lab report the most, but if you don't have Inventory Lab, then you can check out Seller Central. You can also use Replens Dashboard if you're looking for maybe 90-day sales quantities. You can use Scan Power or other software programs out there. Even sometimes Repricers will have your order data that you can download as well, depending on the software that you use. There's plenty of places to find out what's been the most profitable over a long period of time, as well as the largest amount of sales that you've had over a long period of time. All right. So the next thing that you want to do is make sure that you're not getting the major national brands like Nike or Oreos, right? You want to filter those things out. More than likely, unless you have some connections, you're not going to be able to get a distributor for Nike and Oreos or huge national brands like that. So I highly recommend to avoid those brands. Or brands like them. You also don't want store private label brands. I actually did a video on this channel from an arbitrage perspective. How do you find store private label brands? Because those are amazing from an arbitrage standpoint to be able to sell Walmart's private label brands, Home Depot's, Lowe's, Kroger's. All of their private label brands are great for arbitrage. But if you're doing wholesale, naturally, you're not going to be able to buy those wholesale. So you're going to want to filter those things out as well. What you want to be looking for are niche products or local products or regional products in your area. And the reason is because these typically will have less competition from a national perspective. Typically, you can also order lower order volumes than if you're placing an order for Oreos, for instance. You're probably going to have to place a massive order for Oreos, whereas with a niche product that is much smaller company or a local product that isn't as widely known, you will typically be able to order in maybe case amounts of 6 or 12 or 10 or whatever. So it just depends on the particular brand that you're looking for. But you want to look for those niche and local products. The next thing is you want to look at the back of the packaging for contact information. If you have the packaging with you, if it's something you're currently selling in your store, this helps you to determine who you should be contacting, how you should contact them, and you've got a direct point of contact from the packaging standpoint. That is what we did for our biggest wholesale account. I looked at the back of the packaging, saw that it was manufactured in a place close to us, and I contacted them directly and was able to create a relationship with them from a wholesale perspective that eventually turned into an exclusive relationship down the road. Again, I plan to do videos on exclusives much later in this series. I went the wrong way. The next thing that you want to do is contact the brand first. So I highly recommend, don't just go to a distributor that distributes them. Go to the brand first and see if there's some way that you can be direct to the brand. And the reason is because they typically will have the highest discounts on their products because there's no middleman at that point. Many times, if the brand does not sell direct to anybody, then they'll tell you, hey, here's our list of distributors that you can contact. Here's our list of distributors in your area that you can work with. They will tell you that. But if there is the ability to work with them, I highly recommend doing that first before contacting a distributor, because the distributor just adds extra tape and extra money and all of these other things to actually getting the product, whereas working with the brand can be very beneficial, not just from a pricing standpoint and discounts, but also from creating an exclusive relationship down the road if that is your desire, if you want to have an exclusive relationship with them for selling online. After that, if there's no luck with contacting the brand and they don't give you a list of distributors, or maybe there is no contact for the brand because they're that small or niche, then Google them, right? That's a great advice, right? Google them, use their brand name and look up the brand name distributor or brand name wholesaler. Both will typically give you different results. It just depends on the SEO of the company, but that is what I've used for getting ungated and major brands. That's what I've used for finding wholesale information. This is the basics of just Googling, but looking for that brand name and a distributor or brand name and wholesaler, unless they have no one. But if they have no distributor or wholesaler, then typically you're going to be working with the brand directly anyway. So those would be the 2 steps into actually how to contact the wholesale companies. Now, sometimes these distributors and wholesalers can be small because they could be regional and local, depending on the products. And so you may have to go many pages into the Google results. It might actually be the first result, depending on the company, but it could also be 4 or 5 pages in. So I highly recommend, don't just give up after the first couple. If it's an amazing product that you really want a distributor and a wholesale account relationship with, just keep looking until you find one that is the true distributor and wholesaler for that company. And if you can't find anything, then you can move on to another product. It's not the end of the world. If you can't find a distributor or wholesaler and the brand has no luck in contacting them, I don't know how they're selling their products if that's the case, but typically you will be able to get a hold of somebody that will tell you yes or no through those two methods. So what do you say to open a wholesale account? Again, you want to keep this simple. And so what we do is we start with an email. Now, if you can make it personal to the brand, that's better. It's not just a copy and paste email. You do not want to be sending out, hey, I loved your product. Please send me your price list, etc. You actually want to mention the brand name, maybe a couple products if you can. You want to make it more personal. The reason is because there's so many wholesale courses. Almost every wholesale course out there gives you templates to use. Yes, I'm going to be showing you a template that I use, but you still want to tailor it to the brand for the best results. Now, many people will say, well, it's better just to send 100 cold emails, get 1 or 2 accounts, and you're good to go from there. You don't need to make it personal. You just want to send out a mass amount of emails. However, I have found that I get a much, much better response rate if I'm able to tailor it to their products, if I'm able to specifically tell them why I'm interested in their products. And ultimately, this is what I'm going to recommend that you do, that you take whatever little template I'm about to give you and that you tailor it to people's products. I start with email. I don't start with phone. However, you will get a better result many times with picking up the phone and utilizing a similar template to this email template to talk to the right people. But ultimately, I like to start with email because it can be the simplest way to go. So here's what we say. Obviously, hello. My company is located in this city or state. I'm interested in purchasing whatever it is on a wholesale basis. You can mention a particular product. I don't recommend copying and pasting an ASIN from Amazon, but you can mention the type of product that you're looking to buy on a wholesale basis. You can add in there, what information do you need from me? Or do you have price discounts for large orders? And then obviously, thank you, first and last name. So let's break this down real quick and why I keep it this short and sweet. A lot of emails. So I've worked with exclusive relationships with wholesale or with brands in the past. I still do. And what we see a lot of times, they'll forward me the emails that all of you sellers out there are sending them because naturally you are, the brands I work with, they get these emails every day and they hate them. And the reason they hate them is because they're typically the same. They're templates. They don't mention the brand. They don't mention anything. They're typically from a sketchy website that doesn't make any sense as to how it would help their brand or why they should be selling the product anyway. And it's just going to be something that is way too lengthy because many wholesale sellers will write paragraphs of information saying that they sell on e-commerce platforms. They specialize in it. They can help with X, Y, and Z. They can do all of these different things. I have seen those templates and I personally do not like them because as a business owner, I open that. I see it's a stock email that mentions nothing about my brand. And I see that they're talking about being specialists on Amazon like everyone else claims to be. I would just delete that right away. I may not even open it. But what I like to do is keep them short and sweet because in my eyes, if I am a store owner, and I want to buy a product from a brand, I don't have to go there and give them all this information about my retail store. I just want to say, hey, I'm interested in selling your product in my retail store, offline. Let's just pretend for a second. This is where I'm located. This is what we're interested in buying. What do you need from me? That typically has gotten me a much better response. Now, your mileage may vary. Try different things. Don't just copy and paste this, please. You want to tailor it to the brand. You can say things like, hello, I know my customers love your product, which is true. If you followed this series, you're doing this because your arbitrage sales have gone so well and you know your customers are buying this. So you can say, hey, my customers love your product. I'd like to fully stock it on a wholesale basis. What information do you need from me? Do you have price discounts for large orders? Let's talk about that for a second. Why do I have those questions in there? Because each company is different. What information do you need from me? I like to ask that because they might need a bunch of information or they might just need 1 or 2 things. I personally don't like to suggest the information they should ask for from me. Like, hey, do you need my tax resale certificate? Do you need a credit application? Do you need references? Do you need this? Because I don't want to put ideas into their head. I want them to tell me what they need from me. Again, change it up, see what works better for you, test out a bunch of different templates or designs of an email and see what works for you. But for me, I like to keep it basic. The next thing is, do you have price discounts for large orders? I love to ask that question. A lot of sellers actually do ask questions similar to this in their emails, but I like to ask it because to me, it does show that I am interested in large orders, right? So if I'm a brand that's receiving this email, I'm seeing, oh, this person is so interested in my product that they may be willing to place a large enough order that I give them price breaks or I give them free shipping discounts, etc. And so to me, it kind of positions me as a bigger buyer, so to speak, in their eyes. If versus if I didn't ask that question, they may just look at me as another account. But ultimately, you can see it's very short, it's very sweet. It is saying, these are the facts. I'm here. I want to purchase this. What do you need from me? And do you have discounts for these massive orders? Thank you, first, last name, contact information, whatever you want to put, that is up to you. That's what I start with. Now, whenever you start with an email like this, typically it's a little bit of a longer email process than if you were to start with all of your information out the gate. There's a bunch of different ways you can test it, but if you wanted to be one of those sellers that did multiple paragraphs that talked about your Amazon expertise and what you can do for the brand, if they respond happily and they want to work with you, then that's a much better lead than somebody that responds to my basic email. But ultimately, it's up to you. Test out a bunch of different things. This is my basics of what I like to use to get a response from them, to open up a dialogue and a conversation of what they're needing from me to move forward. Now, what do you do after that? You want to keep reaching out to other brands that you're interested in. You don't want to just start with one and stop. You do want to send multiple emails a week. Many companies or wholesale courses recommend 100 a week. Personally, I don't really care if you put a number on it until you are comfortable with this, because if you reach out to 100 and you get 10 or 15 of them, which is a really high amount, but if you were to get that, then you may be overwhelmed. So I just recommend reaching out to a set amount a day. Maybe you choose you want to reach to 5 a day, 10 a day, 20 a day, whatever fits your schedule, but reach out the other brands you're interested in based on the other videos I did in this series of how do you figure out which products you should be purchasing from your arbitrage business and turning into wholesale accounts. So keep reaching out to the other brands. It can be a waiting game for sure. Sometimes they'll respond within 24 hours. Sometimes they'll respond in 2 weeks. And so you want to have a follow-up plan moving forward. So if you don't hear back within a week, you want to call them and say the same thing that was in that email. So I'm going to go back a few bullet points. You want to call them and say, hey, whoever I'm talking to, I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm interested in purchasing, your whatever product on a wholesale basis. Who do I need to talk to? And then they'll direct you to that person that you need to talk to. And you'll say, hey, I'm located in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm interested in purchasing this on a wholesale basis. Wanted to know what you needed from me to open an account and if you have any price breaks on large orders. It's a very simple phone script as well as an email script. I love it. It's not combative. It's not too much. It's not too little. I think that it's a perfect amount for who I am. You may be very different, so tailor the things to your cadence, tailor the things to what you want to send out. But ultimately, that's what I like to use if I'm picking up the phone after a week of not hearing back. Again, for me, I like to start with email first, then I call later. Many people, you might want to reverse that. Maybe call first and email later, whatever you feel best with. Now, here's the next thing, and I will have a whole separate video, so I'm probably going to cover this again a little bit in a separate video, but it's going to be on objections that you can get from wholesale accounts, brands, distributors, etc. The first objection that it might be, and this isn't really an objection up front, but it's a question that is, to me, framed as an objection to working with me, is if they ask you if you sell on Amazon, what do you do? You want to be honest. That is the first and foremost thing, in my opinion, because if you start out your relationship and say, no, I don't sell on Amazon, just give me the account, then it's going to be a big problem for you in the future because they'll figure it out eventually. So what I recommend is that many times you can turn it into a positive conversation. That's what I'm going to be going into a much bigger deep dive with objections in the future video. But you can take this question if they say, hey, do you sell on Amazon or other third-party marketplaces, e-commerce platforms? You can turn it into a positive conversation because typically they're asking you that question because they want to say, oh, we don't open accounts with new Amazon sellers. If they don't care if you sell on Amazon, then why are they asking you the question? So here's how I recommend turning it into a positive conversation. And you want to be prepared with this and know their listings before you actually call them. So you want to say something like, hey, actually, that's why I was calling you today. It was one of the reasons I was calling you today. We typically will only purchase from vendors that have 3 or less sellers on a listing. And I noticed that right now you have 5, or you have 10, or you have 12, or you have whatever. Is that something you're trying to get a better handle on? Now, if they already only have 1 or 2 sellers on a listing, it's going to be very difficult for you to get the account anyway to sell on Amazon, because more than likely it's an exclusive relationship, depending on the Keepa graph. So you need to know that. It's not always the case, but depending on the graph. But if they are having a problem with Amazon, they're trying to limit their amount of sellers on Amazon, they're going to ask that question, and you can make it positive and just say, actually, that was one of the reasons I was going to call, or I was calling you. I wanted to ask you this. Hey, we typically only purchase from vendors with 3 or less sellers, and you have 6 right now, which is concerning for me. Is that something you're trying to get a better handle on? And then many times they're going to be stopped in their tracks, because I don't believe that they hear that all the time. Now, if people see this video and it gets really, blows up or something, a lot of people start using it, they're going to get used to that. But you want to turn this conversation into something that is much more positive, that maybe they'd say, actually, yes, we are trying to get a better handle on it. You can say, okay, well, what are you doing to get a better handle on that? And then you kind of are coming at it from a position of authority to a certain extent. If they say we're working with a partner to reduce that, you can ask more questions. Say, oh, how long have you been working with them? Who is it? How has that relationship been going? Right? You can have a conversation. This is not a high pressure thing. You're just trying to find out information. They just started with the company. You could say, well, hey, I'm happy to help. If you want to work with me on that, I can work with the company. Or if they've been doing this for a while and aren't seeing success, then you can say, hey, I've noticed you haven't had success. I've got people that I can talk to help with getting the seller issue under control. That's up to you. But ultimately, this is how you can spin it into a positive conversation that may turn into an exclusive or semi-exclusive relationship as you move forward with it. Many times they're still going to say, no, we're good, don't want to deal with you, and they'll hang up. And that's fine. Move on to the next one. This isn't a hard and fast rule that works every time, but it is a good way to take that conversation and spin it into something that may actually become a better opportunity for you moving forward. Continuing on, what should you do there? If they turn you down, that's common. I recommend contacting them again in 6 months. Things can change. Personnel can change. Ultimately, maybe they have a bigger issue with Amazon sellers coming on the listing and tanking their prices, ruining their brand reputation. And so you want to be able to contact them regularly, put them into some sort of customer relationship like software, CRM software, like I think HubSpot would be one that's free up front, or just put it in your calendar to contact them again. The bigger the brands are, the more likely you are to get turned down. And usually the numbers I've heard from every wholesale course is 2 or 3 for every 100 reach outs with these bigger brands that are getting contacted all the time. If you're dealing with local brands or regional brands, you might have a much higher success rate, maybe 5-10% of the time or higher, depending on what you do. And so I believe for me, it's roughly about 10% because we cherry pick the ones that we want to reach out to, if I remember right. I don't have that specific statistic broken down, but it is a much higher likelihood than 2 or 3 out of every 100 because we are very specific in where we reach out. Now, if you focus on the local and niche products, you will get better results, as I just mentioned, and tailoring your approach to each brand versus blasting out emails also gets better results. And so if you are using the template that I mentioned at the beginning of this video and you're tailoring it to the specific products that they sell, you're creating a relationship with them. You're talking about their brand specifically. Maybe you know a little bit about the person that you're reaching out to because it's such a small company that does well on Amazon. But you can reach out to the owner and say, hey, I saw this, you're a fan of the St. Louis Cardinals or whatever. So am I. Would love to sell your products. Whatever it might be, if you can tailor your approach, you have a much better results. That's just natural sales, right? That's how to win friends and influence people 101, right? Tailor your approach to them, be specific to them, and you'll get better results from a sales perspective than if you're just blasting out cold emails that are not tailored to the brands and the distributors specifically. Now, if they say yes, place an order, pretty obvious. Make sure to get them your retailer certificate or your reselling certificate and any information that they require as soon as possible. You don't want a bunch of downtime. You want to get that to them very quickly. So this very first one is we already have enough Amazon sellers and we do not want any more. So in the prior series, the prior video, it was how do we answer the question of, hey, do you sell on Amazon? In this particular one, we're talking about these objections. We already have enough Amazon sellers and we don't want any more. So here's my recommendation. First, this is what I would say something like this. Don't just memorize it, but I would say something like, actually, that is why I was calling you today, or that was one of the reasons I was calling you today, because I wanted to ask this question, which is we typically only purchase from vendors with 3 or less sellers on the listing. And you can say 4 or less, you can say 2 or less, but we typically only purchase from vendors that have 3 or less sellers on an Amazon listing. And I notice right now you have 5 or you have 10 or 12 or whatever it is. Is that something you're trying to get a better handle on? Because clearly, if they say, hey, we already have enough Amazon sellers, we don't want any more of you, that means that they're frustrated with it and they more than likely want a better handle on it. Also, because we're typically reaching out to brands that have multiple sellers on the listing, more than 1 or 2, we know that they're having a problem with a bunch of sellers. And so usually they want to get a better handle on it. So if they say, now here's an objection, but let's say you piqued their interest with that question and they say, actually, yes, we'd love some help. Is that something you help with? Or what can you do? Something to that effect. And here's how I would typically recommend you respond. You can either go one of 2 ways. One, you can respond with the exact strategies that you'd use or some of the things that you'd want to create a further discussion on. Maybe we help you with listing content. We help with making sure there's no counterfeit claims or no counterfeit sellers on your listing. We enroll you into specific programs like brand registry. These are the things that we do. Or if you don't know what you would do, maybe you've never done this before, or you would create a partnership with somebody else, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, to do that for you, and you get a profit share from them, you can respond with something else like this. And this would be my typical response. Well, actually, there's a lot of different things that we can do to help your brand presence on Amazon and to reduce your headaches with the platform, because we all know that Amazon has headaches. There's no denying that. And that's what we work with. So let's set up a meeting, actually, because it's a much larger discussion. Let's set up a meeting to discuss it so I can prepare some more information on your specific listings for you to review, for us to review together, however you want to say it. Would next Tuesday, and I meant to say at 2 p.m. Central Time, work for you? That is a great way to say, oh, wow, yeah, if they're asking, if they're actually interested, you get to push off this meeting so you can be more prepared for their particular listings, but you also can bring in another specialist if you don't know what you're doing to actually help with this problem, and you can create that partnership there. I love being able to buy some time. Typically, if they're actually interested, they will be happy to set up a meeting with you. If they aren't interested, then they'll continue to push you off and they'll say, oh, I don't have any time for a meeting. What can you do now? Like, tell me what you can do. And then that becomes a big pain. I don't know if I'd want to work with somebody like that anyway. I'd rather say, well, there's a lot of things we can do, as I just mentioned, and I don't want to just cram it all in on a 2-minute phone call. I'd love to give you a much more detailed review of your brand, of your presence on Amazon, and the specific tactics and strategies we'd take after looking at all of your listings combined, because there's different things that we would do based off each individual listing. I'm not going to go through every single one and list out each listing what we would do, but I will give you, after looking at all of them, I'll give you our highest recommendations. And I may bring on an extra specialist to be on the call with us, because this is what we do for a living. This is how we help brands. So that is what I would say if you do get them interested. Now, if they say, hey, we're not interested in getting a better handle on Amazon, we're happy with where we are, we just aren't allowing anybody else, you can try to continue to push back. But ultimately, I would probably say, hey, I understand. I will follow up with you in a few months, though, just to see if anything changes, see if you're interested in getting some help from us for controlling the problem. But I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you in a few months. And you can just leave it at that. I think it's totally fine to move on if they say no. And even if they have a problem and they don't realize it, I would definitely recommend just being kind and saying, okay, awesome, totally understand. I'll contact you in a few months, as I mentioned in the last video. So if you haven't seen the whole series, go back and check out the last video. Let's say I'll contact you in a few months, and just to see how you're doing. The next objection. So this is when somebody says, actually, we already have someone that handles Amazon for us. No thanks. Many times if they say that, they're just going to hang up on you. Okay. They may just click, right? Maybe we already have somebody that handles Amazon for us. Click. And in that case, you can leave it alone. Maybe you send a follow-up email and you can respond with something like this that I'm about to go through. But ultimately, this is usually what you hear right before you hear a phone clicking and hanging up on you. But if you do get the opportunity to respond on the phone or through email, then I typically recommend saying the following. But this will, I also want to point out that we don't usually contact someone that has one or two consistent sellers on their listings based off the Keepa graphs, which I talked about in earlier videos. So if you're seeing that it's always one seller on a listing, I'm most likely am not reaching out to them anyway. We're usually only contacting them if they've got more than 3 or 4 sellers, because I assume that they're allowing more Amazon sellers at that point. And then I can just be another Amazon seller, because we're not aiming for exclusives. We're typically aiming just for the wholesale and distributor relationship to buy products on a bulk basis at higher discounts. So we don't typically contact someone with 1 or 2 consistent sellers on their listings based on Keepa. So what that tells me is that they actually probably have a problem, right? Quote and unquote, that they aren't getting resolved with the person that is handling Amazon for them. And so this is what I would respond with. Oh, so act a little surprised in this, right? My response would be, after they say, we already have someone that handles Amazon for us, you get the chance to respond, say, oh, I actually couldn't tell that, since I saw you had 8 sellers on your listings and the pricing has fluctuated between $10 and $20 over the last couple months based off the internal data that I have. So would you want to discuss how we can help you with these issues to control pricing and to control the sellers at all? They'll probably say no, but it might actually pique their interest. It's way better than saying, oh, okay, I get it, thank you, and ending it. You can at least sound a little bit more surprised. You can give them some data. You don't have to do the pricing fluctuations if you don't want to. You just say, oh, wow, I didn't realize that. I saw that you had 7 or 8 sellers. And typically we like to work with brands that have 3 or less. Would you like to discuss how we can help you with that issue? And it might continue the conversation. Again, we're talking about how to handle objections here. They aren't hard and fast rules that always work 100% of the time, but if they can continue a conversation and give you a bigger opportunity from an exclusive or semi-exclusive relationship, or to bring somebody else in on a profit partner relationship, then you've got a lot more ability to do that with these responses. Now, whenever you say that, make sure there actually are more than 3 or 4 sellers and some pricing fluctuation before you do that. So you want to do some homework before you call them, so that you know some information about at least a couple of their listings, so that if they are like, what are you talking about? We only have 1 or 2 people on it. You can say, well, actually this listing right here has 5. This one here has 7. This one here has 4. In looking at that, I assumed that you had more seller problems than was being handled. Or you can say, well, actually in May of 2022, it was selling at $20. And now in October of 2022, it's selling at $9. And that's a pretty high pricing fluctuation that has to be upsetting your retail partners that can't compete with those Amazon prices. If you have data to back it up, you can continue a conversation and then as quickly as possible, move them into the response that I gave earlier, which is, would you like to set up a meeting next Tuesday or whenever at 2 p.m. Central Time, right? Have that ready as well. If you're doing wholesale, this is a business. You can't just wing it. You need to have some responses ready, have some data ready when you're calling them, and have some availability on your calendar with 2 or 3 times that you can recommend to meet moving forward. Now, if there are only 1 or 2 sellers, and for whatever reason you're reaching out to them because you wanted to try to become another seller on their listings, then I recommend also checking for other issues on their listings, like bullet point issues, descriptions, images, titles, A+ content, brand registry, etc. If you don't know what that is, there's a ton more information on YouTube. Check those things out. But you want to look at those things as well that you can help them with. Most of the time, again, you're going to be contacting a brand that has way more than 2 sellers on the listings, or at least a few more than that. But if they have 1 or 2 sellers, and that's not an issue that you can respond with, then you would rather respond with, oh, I couldn't tell that you were working with somebody on Amazon because I noticed that your descriptions aren't utilizing HTML content. I noticed you only have 2 pictures instead of the 8 that are allowed, excuse me, plus a video on the listing. I noticed that you aren't enrolled in brand registry, at least for the listings I've looked at. And I was wondering if you'd like some help with fully optimizing the Amazon platform, since that's what I specialize with, or my team specialize with if you're bringing somebody else in, right? So that's what you can do to have a response for, hey, we already have someone that handles Amazon for us. The third most common objection that I see Which, by the way, if you've seen other objections on top of these, please post them in the comments below. I'd love to formulate responses on them, and I can potentially give you some responses in the comments with my answers, or I can make a separate video going through some more common objections if you like this video. So the third most common one is we don't allow Amazon sellers to sell our products. To me, this is the easiest one to deal with. Many times you could still have a click after you hear that response, and then you can follow up with an email or follow up a week later with a phone call and just say, hey, I know you don't allow Amazon sellers to sell your products, but I'd love to talk to you about this issue. But the reason that this is the easiest one to handle is because you can whenever I used to do sales, I used to sell commercial insurance, and they talk about, and it's not the kindest term, but professionally punching somebody in the face. And it was always a funny term to me, but you can professionally punch somebody in the face by saying, hey, ultimately you have Amazon sellers on your listing, so you need to control it. If you're not allowing them, how are they getting on here, right? So here's what I typically would respond with. Hey, I totally understand that you don't allow Amazon sellers on your listings, and you don't want to sell to other Amazon sellers because it creates a bigger headache and problem for you, right? But it is interesting, however, that you currently have 8 sellers on your listings with varying pricing fluctuations based off our internal data. Is that something you'd like help with? Because if you don't allow Amazon sellers to sell your products, how are they getting onto these listings? I can help you with that. If you can come at it confidently from that, they may be very interested, because if they say we don't allow Amazon sellers to sell our products, they're saying that because they typically don't have somebody else that is helping them with the Amazon problem. So you may be the first one to be able to actually come to them, provide a solution. And if they say, actually, yes, we would love to have some help with that, in which case you can follow that prior advice I gave you earlier about, okay, cool. Well, there's a lot more that we can do from an Amazon side. So I'd love to set up a meeting next week where I can give you some specific examples of what we can do, bring in some partners, or, just meet with you if it's you. And we can dig deep into what we would do for your brand or for your company. And so that is what I would follow if they are interested in it. Again, this is the easiest one to overcome if they don't just hang up on you, which is because you can point out to them, professionally punch them in the face, as I was always told. I know it's probably not the best term to use, but you're saying, hey, I get that you're not allowing Amazon sellers, but you've got a problem. And if you don't allow sellers, then this problem is something you need to deal with. I can help with that. But let's get into these extra tips that I've been mentioning throughout this series that I was going to be doing, which is on growing your Amazon FBA wholesale business. So the first tip is to look at other product lines that your wholesale account, your brand, sells. Many of the brands that I work with don't just sell that one brand in particular. They sell multiple brands underneath an umbrella brand of their own, right? So maybe if you think of it like Nestle sells a bunch of different brands underneath their bigger or umbrella brand, right? If you think of Johnson & Johnson, you think of most businesses, they aren't just going to be one product line, one brand. They're going to be multiple product lines, maybe under the same brand, or multiple brands underneath an umbrella of brands. And so you want to start looking at these other product lines that they sell to see if those are just as good on Amazon as the ones that you had initially reached out to them on. And again, this doesn't just mean that it has to be an exclusive product. It can be for a brand that you have reached out to and they gave you a wholesale account and they're non-exclusive, and you want to start looking at the other brands and products that they sell to increase how much you can purchase from them, to increase your relationship with them, to increase your sales and profitability on Amazon, etc. So definitely look at the other product lines they sell. Don't just focus on the one product or the one product line, because then you're going to be missing out on a lot of other revenue and profit from the other product lines that may also be on Amazon or on other e-commerce marketplaces. The next thing is to look at multi-packs and bundles. I mentioned that in an earlier video of why Replens, starting with Replens and Arbitrage, is best before getting into wholesale, because you learn how to find these multi-packs and bundles. But ultimately, this is where I'm going to mention it again. If you're looking for multi-packs and bundles using the Replens Arbitrage strategies that I go through in my book, Side Hustle to Full-Time Income, if you're using those strategies, you can also apply them to your wholesale business. And many wholesale sellers only look at UPC matches. Now, with some of the changes with GTIN, requirements that Amazon has, UPC matches are the safest way to go about doing this because those are the listings that Amazon loves the most. But there are still bundles that you can look for that have multiple different products in them. That maybe you have a couple wholesale accounts that have the component pieces for those bundles that you can sell, or maybe that one brand that you're working with has multiple pieces that have been bundled together that have a different UPC. Whatever it might be, I highly recommend looking for multi-packs and bundles and expanding the amount of products that you're able to purchase and sell for that particular brand. Multi-packs should be something that comes from the brand. It should be a multi-pack built by the brand with their own UPC, but sometimes us sellers may avoid that or not look at that particular product for whatever reason. And so I highly recommend asking or looking for the multi-packs on the Amazon platform. Also, if you've got a good enough relationship with the brand, many times you can help get those listings fixed with UPCs from the brand that then you are able to continue selling. And so it just really depends on your relationship with them. Always look for multi-packs and bundles and see how you can best work within Amazon's system, but also work with the brands and companies, distributors that you are purchasing from. The next thing is, once you've been selling the brand for a while, you can bring up reasons to be exclusive with them or to be semi-exclusive with them in your relationship. Because I believe if you've been selling the brand for a while, you've got a lot more data, you've got a lot more reasons to contact them and say, hey, I've noticed these issues and I'd like to help you fix these issues and be the exclusive seller. Here's the benefits for working with me directly or with choosing 2 or 3 sellers that are allowed to sell your products so that it can be spread amongst 2 or 3 of us versus 8 to 10 of us, and there's pricing issues or there's branding issues on the listings, etc. You can use some of the things I've talked about in the prior videos in this series to open that conversation to become an exclusive with them. The next thing is to make sure to manage your cash flow well. This is the most difficult piece for just about any Amazon FBA business, whether it's arbitrage or wholesale or private label. Now, I did do a video for the profit first methods of how to manage cash flow, depending on how good you are with managing your money. That can be a video that can help tremendously. Again, it's on this channel. You can just search for profit first and you can find that video. I'll try to remember to link it above or in the description below, but that video will help you in managing your cash flow properly. But just make sure that you don't get over leveraged with credit terms or over leveraged with buying too much product and not having the money for it, over leveraged with loans or credit cards, whatever it might be. Manage the cash flow well. It's a much deeper discussion that would take multiple videos to really go through on a deep level. But the high level video would be the profit first video that I did a while back that you can find on this channel, and I'll try to link it as well. The next thing is still try to order for your 30 to 60 day sales windows. So if you've followed me for any length of time, you've seen my Replens content, my arbitrage content, I typically recommend ordering 30-day sales velocity amounts. So if it's selling 15 in 30 days, that's what you want to order. But with wholesale, sometimes you have to place bigger orders. So try to keep it under 60 days. And then I would typically only send in 30 days at a time worth of stock and inventory. So if you have a prep center, you ordered 50 of them, send in 25 for the next 30 days. And then a few weeks later, have them send in the remaining 25 so that you can sell those over 60 and you're not building up a bunch of storage fees or IPI issues, which again, there's videos on my channel for IPI if you're interested in that, the inventory performance index. But you want to try to keep it within the 30 to 60 day sales windows, unless you have a really deep relationship with this company where you have to place orders for 90 or 120 days, but you've got some really good experience and longevity knowing that those products will sell and you can store them elsewhere and not send them into Amazon directly at that point. But ultimately, still try to order for 30 to 60 day sales windows if you can. Also, replendashboard.com. I've got a whole playlist on this channel about Replen Dashboard. You can utilize that for inventory replenishment suggestions and tracking products. I highly recommend using it. It's good for prep centers to also check out where you can store what is at your prep center. You can save what's at your prep center within the software. It's a company that I own and created for these particular problems. And so if you check out replendashboard.com or the playlist on this channel, you'll see why it can be so helpful for your arbitrage and wholesale business. And then lastly, you want to know the company's prices or their prices or policies on freight charges. So do they give you free shipping quantity discounts? If you order over $1,000, do you get free shipping? Or if you order over 5 pallets, do you get free shipping or discounts? Or you need to know their average cost per pound so you can calculate it into your price. If you're placing your order with a company and they don't have free shipping discounts, which if they do, I would recommend getting up to that point if you can. But if they don't, then try to find out what they believe their average cost per pound would be, so you can calculate that into your price so you know the profitability up front. You can even ask them what their average freight charges would be for a pallet or 2 pallets to your location or your prep center's location. But you want to know that information before placing an order and realizing, oh, this freight is now completely destroying any profit that I had, and so I want to cancel the order, right? So you have to make sure that you know that before you actually place the order. So hopefully that will help you. These are my extra tips right now. Again, becoming an exclusive relationship with a brand can help tremendously. You don't have to be exclusive with them, but you can also bring in other people that have specialization in being exclusive to help you create other streams of income where you pass them on to them, and then you get paid a referral fee, a profit partnership, whatever, from that company. You can also learn the proven product partnering methods where you're partnering with the brand to help them get onto Amazon and have their own Amazon account, and you're getting a percentage of their revenue streams or profit from their Amazon account. And you can start building multiple streams of income. So those are the extra tips that I have. If you're looking for a place where you can learn and meet and network from other e-commerce entrepreneurs that probably have amazing businesses, but also have different methods than what you're currently doing, I recommend the My Silent Team Facebook group. Here is my link for it. It's a free Facebook group. It's got over 70,000 members. It's bit.ly/MST group, and that will be linked in the description below. If you're interested in anything that I do, head over to AskJimmySmith.com. If you'd like to see over 500 of the success stories from the content that I've taught, we've had over 1,000. There's over 500 though at AskJimmySmith.com/success. But please comment below. Let me know your thoughts on this series. This is the last one currently that I had planned, 5 video series on wholesale. If you want to see more information on exclusives, on other topics for wholesale, other objections, comment below. Let me know your thoughts so that I can create further videos on it. And also, as usual, please like the video. It tremendously helps with YouTube's algorithm. Share the video, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, I will see you next time on another video. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a blessed rest of your week.